Why do you feel a little rush of excitement when someone shares juicy gossip with you? That feeling isn't just curiosity, it's your brain getting a hit of validation. You're being trusted with secret information, made to feel special and included in an exclusive circle. But here's what most people don't realize. The person sharing that gossip with you is getting an even bigger validation hit than you are. They're positioning themselves as the insider, the one with connections, the person who knows things. And this psychological dynamic is playing out millions of times a day, shaping our relationships and social hierarchies in ways we never consciously recognize. Think for a moment about a newborn baby's first cry. That sound, piercing through the silence of the delivery room, is more than just a reflex. It's humanity's first call for recognition, the beginning of a lifelong conversation between self and world. From that very first breath, we are creatures who need to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. The psychologist William James wrote about what he called the social self, the part of us that exists only in relation to others. James realized that we don't just want to be noticed, we need to be noticed. Our sense of who we are literally depends on how others respond to us, like a mirror that shows us our own reflection. This need for validation isn't weakness or vanity. It's woven into the very fabric of human development. Erik Erikson, who spent his life studying how we grow and change, showed us that at every stage of life, we're asking the same basic question: do I matter? The toddler seeks approval for taking their first steps. The teenager desperately wants to fit in with their peers, and the adult continues to look for signs that their work and relationships have meaning. Each stage builds upon the last, creating what we might call the architecture of validation, a complex structure where our sense of self rests on the foundation of how others see us. But perhaps no one captured this truth more beautifully than Charles Horton Cooley with his idea of the looking glass self. Cooley suggested that we see ourselves through the eyes of others, like looking into a mirror that reflects not just our appearance, but our worth. We imagine how we appear to others, we imagine their judgment of that appearance, and then we develop feelings about ourselves based on what we think they think. It's a delicate dance of perception and assumption that begins in childhood and never really ends. When we gossip, we're often trying to control that mirror, to influence how others see us by shaping how they see someone else. In this way, gossip becomes not just idle chatter, but a tool in our endless quest to secure our place in the looking glass of human connection. Imagine walking into a room where everyone suddenly stops talking. In that moment of silence, you feel it, the weight of being on the outside of something important. Information, it turns out, is like invisible money that we trade to buy our way into social circles. The French thinker Pierre Bourdieu understood this when he wrote about social capital, the idea that relationships and shared knowledge become a form of wealth. When we share a piece of gossip, we're not just passing along news, we're making a deposit in the social bank, hoping to earn interest in the form of belonging and respect. Georg Simmel, a philosopher who studied human relationships, noticed something fascinating about secrets. He saw that when we share hidden information about others, we create what feels like intimacy between ourselves and our listener. It's as if we're saying, "I trust you with this knowledge," and now we share something special together. But this intimacy is built on the absence of someone else, the person we're talking about. The secret creates a bond between us while simultaneously excluding them, making us feel closer through the act of keeping someone else at a distance. Michel Foucault showed us that knowledge and power dance together in ways we don't always recognize. When we know something about someone that they don't know we know, we hold a subtle form of power over them. This knowledge might be as simple as knowing who someone has a crush on, or as complex as understanding their family struggles. In sharing this information through gossip, we demonstrate our position in the social network. We're important enough to know these things and generous enough to share them. Yet, this temporary elevation comes at a cost, both to those we speak about and to the quality of our own connections, which become based more on what we know than on who we truly are. Watch a group of friends gathered around a lunch table, and you'll witness something as old as humanity itself. As they lean in to share stories about someone who isn't there, they're performing an ancient ritual that binds them together. Henri Bergson, who studied how societies hold themselves together, understood that when we laugh at or judge others as a group, we're actually creating invisible threads that connect us to each other. Each shared glance, each knowing nod, Each moment of agreement about someone else's behavior becomes a small ceremony that says we belong to the same tribe and we share the same values. This tribal nature of gossip reveals something profound about how we form our identities. Emil Durkheim showed us that groups create what he called a collective consciousness, a shared way of thinking and feeling that makes everyone feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. When we gossip together, we're not just talking about individuals, we're defining the boundaries of our group. We're saying, this is how we think people should behave, and anyone who acts differently is not really one of us. It's a way of drawing a circle around ourselves and our friends, making everyone inside feel safe and connected. But René Girard revealed the darker side of this belonging ritual. He noticed that groups often unite by choosing someone to blame or exclude, what he called a scapegoat. Sometimes our gossip isn't really about understanding others, it's about creating someone we can all agree to look down upon. This shared judgment makes us feel superior and united, but it comes with a terrible cost. We live in constant fear that we might become the next person the group decides to exclude. The very ritual that makes us feel like we belong also reminds us how fragile that belonging really is. In seeking validation through this ancient theater of gossip, we often find ourselves trapped in a performance where everyone is both actor and potential victim. There's a curious thing that happens when we criticize others. We often describe qualities we secretly fear we possess ourselves. Carl Jung, who spent his life exploring the hidden parts of human nature, called this our shadow self, all the traits we've pushed away because they make us uncomfortable. When we gossip about someone being selfish or lazy or attention-seeking, Jung would ask us to pause and wonder, are we perhaps seeing our own hidden tendencies reflected in them? This isn't conscious lying or hypocrisy, it's our mind's way of dealing with parts of ourselves we don't want to face directly. Sigmund Freud understood this as a defense mechanism he called projection, like a movie projector casting images from inside our mind onto the screen of someone else's life. When we feel jealous but can't admit it, we might find ourselves talking about how jealous someone else seems to be. When we're struggling with insecurity, we become experts at spotting insecurity in others. Freud saw that our minds are constantly trying to protect us from painful self-awareness, and gossip becomes one of the ways we process difficult emotions without having to own them as our own. Karen Horney, who studied how our relationships shape our inner world, noticed that people often gossip most harshly about others when they're wrestling with their own unmet needs. The person who constantly talks about others being fake might be someone who struggles with authenticity themselves. The one who focuses on others' relationship drama might be avoiding their own loneliness or romantic disappointments. In this way, gossip becomes a kind of emotional therapy session where we work through our own issues by examining them at a safe distance in someone else's life. Through this shadow projection, we seek validation not just from others, but from ourselves, trying to prove that we're different from, and better than, the very qualities we fear we might possess. Here lies one of gossip's cruelest ironies. In our desperate attempt to feel close to others, we often create the very distance we're trying to bridge. Martin Buber, a philosopher who devoted his life to understanding human relationships, distinguished between two ways of relating to others. He called one an I-thou relationship, where we see others as complete, complex beings worthy of respect. The other he called I-it, where we treat people like objects to be used for our own purposes. When we gossip, we transform the person we're discussing from a thou into an iti, reducing their rich inner life to a simple story that serves our need for connection with our listener. This creates what we might call pseudo-intimacy, a feeling of closeness that's built on shaky ground. Jean-Paul Sartre, who wrote extensively about authenticity and self-deception, would recognize this as bad faith, the way we lie to ourselves about what we're really doing. We tell ourselves we're bonding with our friend through shared conversation, but we're actually avoiding the vulnerability that real intimacy requires. It's easier to talk about someone else's marriage problems than to admit our own loneliness. It's safer to analyze another person's mistakes than to share our own struggles and fears. Emmanuel Levinas taught us that true connection comes through taking responsibility for others, seeing their face and recognizing their humanity, but gossip does the opposite. It allows us to feel like we're connecting while actually keeping others at arm's length, both the person we're talking about and the person we're talking to. We never have to risk being truly seen ourselves because we're always focused on seeing others. The result is that we can spend hours in conversation and walk away feeling more isolated than when we began, surrounded by people who know our opinions about everyone else, but who remain strangers to our authentic selves. In seeking validation through this false intimacy, we often find ourselves more alone than ever. If gossip is a symptom of our hunger for connection and worth, then perhaps the cure lies not in fighting the symptom, but in feeding the deeper need in healthier ways. Aristotle, who spent his life thinking about what makes a good life, believed that true happiness comes from developing our character, from becoming the kind of person we can respect, regardless of what others think. When we focus on cultivating virtues like compassion, honesty, and wisdom, we begin to find a source of validation that doesn't depend on putting others down or seeking approval through shared judgment. The ancient Buddhist tradition offers us the practice of right speech, speaking in ways that heal rather than harm. This doesn't mean we can never discuss others, but it asks us to examine our intentions. Are we speaking from curiosity and compassion, or from judgment and the need to feel superior? When we shift from asking what's wrong with them to what might they be struggling with, or how can I understand this situation better, we transform gossip into genuine care and concern. Viktor Frankl, who survived unimaginable suffering and still found meaning in life, taught us that our deepest fulfillment comes not from being validated by others, but from contributing something meaningful to the world. When we redirect the energy we once spent analyzing others' lives into understanding ideas, creating beauty, or serving causes we believe in, we discover a validation that runs much deeper than social approval. This doesn't mean we stop needing human connection, we need it more than ever. But we begin to seek connections based on shared wonder, mutual growth, and authentic vulnerability, rather than shared judgment. In this way, we can satisfy our ancient hunger for recognition, while also becoming the kind of people whose recognition is worth having. We began this journey by recognizing that first cry of a newborn, humanity's earliest call for recognition, and we've discovered that this need never truly leaves us. Through our exploration, we've seen how gossip becomes a complex theater, where we perform our deepest longings, the hunger to belong, the desire to feel important, the need to process emotions we can't quite face directly. We've watched as this ancient human behavior promises connection, but often delivers isolation, offers intimacy but creates distance, seeks validation but finds only temporary satisfaction. Perhaps the most profound insight we've uncovered is that gossip isn't really about the people we discuss. It's about ourselves. It's about our fears, our insecurities, our desperate wish to matter in a world that can feel overwhelmingly large and indifferent. When we understand this, gossip transforms from a moral failing into a signpost, pointing us toward our deeper needs and showing us where we might find more authentic fulfillment. The choice before us isn't between being good or bad people. It's between two different paths to human connection. We can continue seeking validation through the shared judgment of others, finding temporary relief but lasting loneliness. Or we can choose the more difficult but ultimately more rewarding path of authentic relationship, where we risk being truly seen in order to truly see others. As we close, consider this gentle question. What would happen if, the next time you felt the urge to speak about someone else, you instead shared something true about yourself? In that moment of vulnerability, you might discover that the recognition you've been seeking was always available, not through the diminishment of others, but through the courage to be genuinely, completely human.